Well, I think that we may go on. Thank you very much, all of you, for your attendance today. It's been such a pleasure for me to have Nicola Askham here as a special guest. Nicola Askham will talk today about minimal data governance. Is it effective and how to do it? Nicola Askham is one of the most recognized data governance expert in the UK, and she holds a unique level of experience in the data governance field, and she's called the data governance coach. So Nicola is also director and committee member of DEMA UK, sits on the expert panel of dataqualitypro.com, and regularly writes and presents internationally on data governance best practices. So welcome, Nicola. It's a real honor to have you with us today. And well, just the webinar is on you. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mario. Thank you for the lovely introduction. It's an honor to be here too. And apologies in advance to anybody watching. This is the first time I have used Webinar Jam, and when we were practicing earlier, apparently it takes your slides to the end. We do put them back. Right, so let's go to the beginning. You're all getting a bit of a preview now, if you can read quick, about what's coming. So I've prepared this to not obviously last the whole session. I want to be talking to you for, I don't know, 20, 30 minutes. It depends how excited I get and how quickly I speak. But we've deliberately left time to answer your questions at the end. So it's kind of, really down to you to put your questions in the chat box that you can see in front of you, and we'll go through as many of them as we can at the end. So please do feel free to answer questions. So I've been doing data governance for 17 years now, and that's really scary when I say things like that. And I think it's fair to say that in the early days, I was a bit of an evangelist. And strangely, that's a word that I really hate to use now, but it definitely is what I was in those early days. I wanted to do everything. I wanted to govern all data absolutely perfectly. And I worked for a large UK bank at the time, and you can imagine how much data they had. And it really didn't go down very well at all. Me standing at the top of my ivory tower, telling everybody that all data had to be governed and everything had to be perfect. And let's be honest, it really got me nowhere. So I've learned over the years that you've got to be really practical and pragmatic when you're doing data governance. Not only can you not do data governance over everything, I've learned through experience that it's not useful to do data governance over everything, because not all the data that your organization has is as valuable as everything else. So we always need to consider carefully where we put our data governance focus on. And now I would say we need to do that more than ever before. So I kind of started wondering if there's any further I can go in being pragmatic. I don't know what the opposite of an evangelist is, probably a pragmatist, but that's definitely what I've become. So what we're facing now is that, we've got this demand for data governance that's increasing all the time, and even more so as a result of coronavirus. There's more and more focus on data because people want the confidence that they have the right data and that it's good enough quality to make decisions. And they're trying to make big decisions about what their businesses are doing and hoping that it will enable them to survive this situation. So they want to have the confidence they've got the right data and good quality data in order to make those decisions. But at the same time that we've got, the rising demand, we're facing the budgets are being cut. People are not spending money on data governance, but they want more of it. So we've got this conundrum. If we're going to deliver data governance, it has to deliver some benefits. There's really no point doing it just for the fun of it. Now, I absolutely love doing data governance, but let's face it, nobody does data governance for the fun of it. You have to deliver some benefits. And how are you going to do that if you've got very little or no budget? So what we're facing now more than ever before is the requirement to deliver data governance on a shoestring. Now, being a bit of a data governance geek, I do love a definition. So I thought we'd better have a definition of shoestring so that we all understand the same thing. And this is what I found. So basically, it's a small or inadequate budget. And I think, to be fair, that probably sums up what I was saying on the previous slide. This is what people want us to do right now. We're facing a situation where we're being asked to deliver benefits on an inadequate budget. So the question I ask myself is, what can we really do that's useful on that basis? Because if we put in place something called data governance now that isn't well received, doesn't deliver any value, or isn't going to be scalable in the future, then we've wasted whatever time and effort and resources that we do have now. And not only that, we're going to make it harder to do a subsequent attempt or roll out data governance in the future. Now, this is sadly something I've come across many times over the years. If your first attempt at data governance is done poorly and is badly received, your subsequent attempts are going to be even harder and even more challenging to do successfully. So it's really important that we get it right the first time. So if we're going to do a minimal approach, we need to make sure that we do something useful now, but something that's not going to make it harder for us to do data governance properly in the future. We've got to really work out how pragmatic can we be, but still deliver some results, and you know, gives us this good foundation for the future. So I don't know about you, but you think, oh, well, no big challenge there then. So what are we going to do about this? Well, why don't we look at another definition? So when I first heard the term data governance on a shoestring, I really liked the sound of it. Yeah, data governance on a shoestring just sums up what a lot of us are facing at the moment, doesn't it? And I hope you agree that, you know, this is a fairly good definition for it, a minimum approach to proactively managing data quality. But then you come to the example, and I started thinking, how many of you would be happy to stand up at an event or a webinar like this and say, oh yes, my company is doing data governance on a shoestring? It doesn't sound like something to be proud of, does it? It probably sounds like you've done it cheaply or not properly. So I thought, perhaps this isn't a good idea for the approach after all. So I had a little bit of a tweak with the title and came up with the title that we used for the webinar, Minimal Data Governance. And you can see that actually the definition hasn't changed at all. But what I have changed is the example. And I hope that you would be happy to say, my company implemented minimal data governance initially. You know, it makes it sound like you're saying, we took a sensible, practical approach initially because the circumstances required it, but it was only the start of something bigger and better. I've always thought it was absolutely vital to choose your words with care when you're doing data governance and when you're communicating about it, which is what I've been trying to demonstrate with these definitions. If you say we're going to start doing data governance on a shoestring, you're just not going to be taken seriously. It definitely doesn't have the right connotations. However, if you say we're going to do minimal data governance, I think it gives the impression that perhaps it's going to be something that isn't too much hard work, but it's going to be worth doing, and perhaps we can manage to do that. It also gives us an idea that this is just the start and more will follow. So that's all very well. I expect you're thinking, but what does that mean in practice? Well, what you can see on the screen now are quotes that have come from conversations that I have had many times over the years, where people say, can we do just enough data governance to say we're doing it, so that if somebody asks us, we can go, oh, yeah, we're doing data governance. Or the people who say to me, what's the minimum that we have to do to keep our regulator happy and to keep them off our back? And quite often you get faced with the challenges, can we do something that isn't going to take too much effort? And you kind of feel like saying, you know, if you're thinking in any of those kind of ways, I have to tell you, you're in the wrong frame of mind and you're not going to deliver anything that's of any value to your company. And as I've already said, that will probably mean that it's going to be even harder to deliver data governance properly in the future. Now, you've probably seen I don't do slides with loads and loads of words, but I thought these ones were important enough to make them big and put them in the middle of this slide. Minimal data governance has to deliver real value to your company, or there is no point doing it. This is all about focusing on delivering some value. Now, you probably think that's really easy for somebody like me to say, and you're probably listening thinking, oh, well, that's great, Nicola, but how am I going to do that? Well, what you need to do first is start by working out why your data governance, why you're doing data governance for your company in the first place. Now, I'm sure that perhaps many of you have already come across Simon Sinek. If you haven't heard of him, I really, recommend that you look into him. You don't have to go and buy his book, but I really do recommend it. But he did a TED Talk a few years ago called Start With Why. It's absolutely fabulous. I really would encourage you to go and watch that. It's only kind of 15 minutes. Now, Simon Sinek was originally a marketing executive. And he did a lot of analysis on why the most successful marketing campaigns were that successful. And he came to the conclusion that the ones that were really successful started with why you needed the product and not what it was. Now, one of the examples he gives in his TED Talk is the Apple iPod. And he kind of highlighted that Apple, when they first started marketing it, never told us that we needed an iPod. They sold us on the idea that we needed limitless music wherever we went. And they explained that this was possible by having a device that wasn't restricted to your CD Walkman and then how many CDs you could carry around with you. Now I'm showing how old I am. It was only when they convinced us that we needed this unlimited music. They told us we could have it by having an iPod, and they told us about that. Now, we need to take this same approach with data governance. And to be fair, I think this is really important for all things, but it's very, very important for data governance. We need to tell everybody why we're doing it, not what. Now, most people, and me included in the early days, so I'm as guilty of this as the next person, they start with telling you what data governance is. Now, I've already told you I'm a little bit passionate and enthusiastic about the topic, but even I would agree it is the most boring job title, and it doesn't do us any favors. It really doesn't help. So, if you go in and meet somebody and say, I'm come to do data governance here, and this is what it is, you kind of lost them from the beginning. They're really bored. They just don't get excited by it. But if you can explain why you're doing it, what's in it for your organization, people get interested and they start saying, oh, that sounds good. How are you going to do that? When they start saying that, then you can start telling them what data governance is, and they're already interested because they're interested in the why that you've already promised. This approach is really, really useful for selling all manner of things, I'm sure, but absolutely vital for data governance. So I really would encourage you, whether you're going to do minimal data governance or go for the full approach, work out why your organization should be doing data governance. And it's only once you've done that and you've worked out your why that you can start looking at the benefits that you want to get from having data governance in place. Now, this is obviously closely linked to the why. And the benefits are going to be unique to your organization. So for everybody that's dialed in here, I can't tell you exactly what your benefits are going to be. But what I thought we could do is have a quick look at the typical benefits that I've seen that have been realized over the years. And it might give you some ideas of looking at where you might get some benefits. So you've got things like improved efficiency or reduced costs. And that can come from both, mistakes not being made in the first place. Or I often work with someone who uses the term swivel chair integration, which always makes me smile. And he uses that to describe a situation where you have systems that don't talk to each other. And you have somebody who has to literally copy by typing in manually the data from one system into the next. And they swivel their chair and type over here and copy from that one. And you start thinking, how much time is lost in your organization on those kind of activities? Or perhaps people even arguing whether the numbers are right or anything, and double checking and not trusting things in the first place. So, that's one benefit. We've got accurate reporting. Now, I'm an eternal optimist, and I generally believe that most people are good people and they don't make the wrong decisions deliberately. But how many decisions are made on poor quality data or even the wrong data, and people make the wrong decisions? People do that all the time. And I actually worked with a company last year who closed down one part of their business based on some data that they had. And it was only after they had closed down that part of the business that they realized that the data had been wrong and they'd closed down a profitable part of their business. Now, you really don't want to be making decisions like that because of data and something that you could sort out. Perhaps you want your main benefit to be facilitating compliance with regulation. And we'll never get away that depending on the industry you work in, that might be something that you have to do data governance to meet regulatory requirement, in which case that might be your chosen benefit that you're looking for. The next one I've got on the list there is protecting your reputation with customers and suppliers. We all get annoying instances of data quality. I mean, my pet hate is companies putting an H in my name. It's frustrating, but it doesn't cause any major problems. But I can tell you about one company I worked with a number of years back who their major supplier of products to them actually said to them, your data is so bad, it is so rubbish, we waste so much time and effort dealing with you, that if you don't sort your data out in the next 6 months, we're going to stop supplying you. That's scary stuff. You do not want to have that kind of reputation with your customers or your suppliers that they choose not to deal with you. So we need to get data sorted out. The next benefit I've got there is supporting your strategy. And I'm talking corporate strategy here. If you have a data strategy, that's fabulous, but that should be aligned to your corporate strategy anyway. So why I put it here is you should be doing data governance over the data that helps support delivering your strategy. And that will help you focus on the right data. I've got there, having a single version of the truth. So perhaps it's important for you to have a single view of a customer or products or suppliers. And you might be embarking on a master data initiative. And I can tell you, master data doesn't go well and isn't successful if you don't have data governance. So that might be one of the reasons, the benefits that you're looking to get. And then the last one I've got on that slide, I only started talking about a couple of years ago, and I'd been talking to a number of companies that were trying to embrace all the kind of more exciting data management activities, the AI, machine learning, the data science and analytics. And they'd got these massive data sets, but they didn't necessarily understand them very well. And they wanted to create new products or make big decisions based on these data sets. We worked out that actually if you've got data governance in place, it actually enables you to use some of these innovative approaches quickly and safely without diving in and necessarily making the wrong decisions based on data that perhaps you don't understand or could be poor quality. So hopefully that's given you some ideas of the kind of benefits you might be looking to get from data governance. And having identified the benefits that you think you would hope to get for your organization, it's time now to go and manage some expectations with our stakeholders. Now, I've been doing data governance 17 years now, but if you went back even maybe 5 years ago, most people hadn't heard of data governance still, and I had to go and explain everything from scratch. But these days, if you go and talk to your senior stakeholders, the chances are they might have heard of data governance, and they might have already heard that it can deliver them some wonderful benefits. Now, if we're going to take a minimal approach to data governance, we're going to have to manage those expectations because we just can't do everything. So if we've identified why we're going to do it and the benefits we think we can get from doing it, we're going to be able to talk to our senior stakeholders and manage their expectations, get them to agree with what we're planning to do, and explain to them why we're doing a really focused delivery. I think we're also going to need to manage their expectations about time, to be honest. Data governance is never a quick activity. It always takes a long time to put in place data governance. And the bad news is that minimal data governance doesn't get done any quicker. I really don't see how you can get any value from minimal data governance if you do it quickly. Because if you do it quickly, you won't do it properly, and therefore you won't deliver any value. So there was no point doing it. I know I've already said this, but it's a bit of a hobby horse of mine. But there's no point doing it badly, because if you do it badly, it will make it harder to do it at subsequent attempts. And just because it's minimal, it doesn't take less time. And we need to be very clear about this to our senior stakeholders, because otherwise they're going to get bored waiting for us to deliver some benefits. And, they're expecting us to deliver some wonderful benefits next week, and that just isn't going to happen. You need to use the conversations with your stakeholders to prioritize the benefits. Now, you might go in with a list of, 7 like I have here, but you can't deliver all of them at once. So you're going to need to talk to your stakeholders and agree with them which one you're going to focus on. Now, you might have been nodding your head to all of these when I went through them on the previous slide, but you can't focus on delivering all of these at the same time using a minimal approach. So I would say ideally identify 1. I'd probably say no more than 1, but if you have to, go for 2. And really focus on putting in place data governance to deliver that 1. Because what you will find is that you will start delivering some of the other benefits anyway. And once you've got set up to deliver the first one you're focusing on, you're in a really good position to focus on the next one. Now, if you've done all that, and I know this probably thinks like, you're thinking this is hard work, we haven't even got to do any data governance yet, but I think you're going to have to define your scope. We've already worked out why we're going to do data governance. We've worked out which benefit we're going to focus on, but we're really going to have a very limited, focused scope. You might decide that we need to focus on customer data, but perhaps customer data is a huge data set at your company, and you might decide that it's got to be a subset of customer data. Or perhaps you're going to say, we're just going to do data governance just on finance data right now, because that's where the biggest problems are, that's where the biggest pains are. But this is really your opportunity to identify a very small and limited scope. To be fair, I always think it's the best way to do data governance is to do it incrementally in phases. And this is what we're doing, but we're actually making our first phase very, very closely defined. But then when we deliver that well, we're in a really good position to be able to do more. Now, I'll let you do some data governance now. You've done everything else, and you're really in a good position now to design your data governance framework. Now, I teach whole training courses on this, so I can't tell you in 5 minutes exactly what to put in your data governance framework. But what I would say, in my experience, a good data governance has 3 things. It has a policy, because if you don't have a policy that mandates that you're going to do data governance, however minimally you're going to do it, people won't do it. And probably now more than ever before, there are so many things changing in our companies and people are juggling so many things. If we don't have a policy that says we will do data governance, you might find people just say they just don't have the time, they don't have the bandwidth. We need to make sure that this is mandatory. It has to be done. Some senior people in our organization have said, we are going to do this approach. And we need to get that in the policy. Now, the policy doesn't have to be a lengthy document, and given the current circumstances, it's probably better that it isn't, but you want to get something officially signed off that says we're doing data governance, minimal or otherwise. You're also going to need some processes. Now, which processes you're going to have is going to very much depend on your scope, what benefits you're focusing on. But if we don't have processes that are defined, people tend not to do things consistently. And instead of solving problems and improving the situation, we can sometimes make things worse. I definitely did that in the early days by, making people be enthusiastic about data, and they would go and fix things without talking to other people and cause new problems that we didn't have before. So, we do need some processes for people to be consistent. And I have it third on the triangle there, but it's actually the most important thing are the roles and responsibilities. We need to know who's going to be doing what and make that very, very clear, because I'm sure you've all been to the same meetings that I have. We've discussed something. We've all agreed on an action that has to be taken. And then we all go away and assume that somebody else is going to do it. And we come back to the meeting next week and Mario says, so Nicola, did you do that? And I go, no, Mario, I thought you were doing it. And he goes, oh no. And then we look at everybody else in the room and everybody goes, well, no, I thought somebody else was doing it. And I have to tell you, data governance is a lot like that. If we don't have defined roles and responsibilities, you will find that everybody will agree to data governance. They think it's a great thing to improve data quality, to give us a better understanding of our data. But they all think it's somebody else is going to do it. So we need to make sure that we get those roles and responsibilities defined. And to be fair, you know, none of these three things go away from having a minimal approach to data governance. We still need to be doing this properly. What I want you to think about is designing a framework for now to meet the things that we've already agreed, your why, your scope, your benefits. But you need to be designing your framework in such a way that it's scalable for the future. You view this just as the start. You don't want to design a data governance framework now that you need to tear up and start again next year or in 2 years' time. This is just the beginning about designing something that can evolve and grow with your company over time. So, if you thought that was a quick overview of a data governance framework, this one's going to be even quicker. Once you've designed your framework, you're going to have to decide what you're actually going to deliver. Now, again, this is something I spent slightly longer when I'm doing training, but I tend to summarize everything that you can see on the slide here as data governance deliverables, because I didn't know what else to call them. They're things that you have when you're doing data governance that you wouldn't have had before. And I just thought data governance stuff or data governance things didn't sound very professional. So quite a few years back, I started calling them the data governance deliverables. And, you know, there are, you know, probably many others you can include here, but I think what you can see on the screen are the main ones. So I get it down to the 8 main ones. And I've got the policy, which we've already spoken about, because I think if you don't have a policy that describes what you're going to do to manage your data, it's very hard to even start doing data governance. The next one I've got there is the operating model. Now, I believe that you need one or maybe a selection of documents, depending on how your organization does things, that provide the detail of what you're going to do. It supports the data governance policy and it gives you detailed descriptions. So it could be role descriptions or perhaps detailed process maps. If you're doing minimal data governance, I'm not sure that you want to spend an awful lot of time and effort in doing a very detailed operating model at this stage. You're going to need enough documentation to support what you're doing, but don't make an industry out of documentation at this stage. I just bear in mind that you need to have some documentation, but don't go overboard. This is about trying to have a minimal approach and doing things and keeping things moving on. Now, I think most people have heard of data glossary or a data catalog that provides the definitions of your data and you know, other useful details about that data, about what it can be used for, who the data owner is. So I won't spend a lot of time on that. One very often neglected or overlooked deliverable is data lineage. I think it has great value, but it is often overlooked. It's the graphic representation of how data flows through your organization. So it might show data coming in through your website where a customer types something in and it goes through to your order system, which talks to the inventory system, and finally their data turns up in your data warehouse. Now, having that all mapped out, I think is really, really useful. But in my experience, most people only do that when there's a regulatory requirement for them to do that, or they're trying to solve a big data quality problem and work out where things have gone wrong. And I'll be honest, I think the people that do it when they don't have to are fairly mature in their data governance journey. So I wouldn't necessarily worry about data lineage in a minimal approach unless it's needed to deliver the benefits that you're specifically looking for. Now, if you've decided that perhaps putting some data quality reports in place to so you can start monitoring and understanding how good your data is one of your priorities, and you're going to need some data quality rules, because we can't do reports unless we know what it should be. So we need some rules to tell us what the data should be, and then we can measure, produce reports that give us exceptions to those rules. Now, there are many processes. I mentioned processes on the previous slide, but there's one process that I always encourage everybody to have, and I would especially encourage you to have it if you're taking a minimal data governance approach, and that's the data quality issue resolution. Data governance takes a long time. I think I mentioned that earlier. It doesn't look good if you say, we're going to help improve the quality of data here, but maybe next year we'll have some data quality reports in or something. That looks like you kind of go, we will do it, but not yet. So it's going to take us 6 months to a year to get any data quality reports in place, and believe me, it can do that. You need to be able to do something now to improve the quality of data, to prove that you're doing something valuable. And that's where this process comes in, because it allows people to notify you of issues they have. You can then prioritize those issues and start fixing them long before we're able to do any data quality reporting. And, and perhaps even before we've managed to get a data glossary in place. So I think this is a really good one to do. It is a way of you delivering some value and solving some problems quite quickly. And then finally on this slide, I've got risks and controls around data. And to be honest, you probably want to ignore this one in a minimal data governance approach, unless you're doing data governance to meet a regulatory requirement when it might well be needed. But this is it's a very like an operational risk approach, and a very mature thing to be doing is looking at the risks to your key data and looking at what you can do to mitigate those risks to try and stop them happening in the first place. It's a good thing to do, but I would probably leave that till later when you're thinking about extending your data governance framework. Now, even in normal circumstances, I would say we can't do all these things at once. And I would be kind of drawing up a long phased implementation plan for when we were going to do all these things. But for a minimal approach, I think we need to be very, very focused on what we need to put in place to deliver our benefits. And that might be that you only choose one or two of these. But I think really don't try and do everything at the moment. Pick what you need to do. I'm not saying pick one or two and exclude the rest forever. I'm just saying for this, view your minimal data governance as a first initial implementation, almost like a pilot, if you will. Choose carefully what you're going to do, because you're going to be asking business users to do some activities to support your data governance initiative. And you don't want to be asking them to do too much. You can't be saying we're doing minimal data governance and then turn up with this huge list of things that you want them to do for you. It's kind of, you're sending mixed messages. So we've got to make sure that we're consistent in everything we're doing. So given everything that you've heard so far, and, I suppose the question that you were hoping I would answer was, can minimal data governance be effective? Well, yes, I think it can. I think it's probably been increasingly the way I've been approaching data governance over recent years. And what I'm encouraging you all to do is be more pragmatic and even more focused than I normally am. And I thought I'd got pretty good at it. But I think if you do that and do all the things we've discussed so far, I think you will be able to deliver minimal data governance on a small, or, to go back to the definition, inadequate budget, but something that can deliver some real benefits for your organization. But I think you need to bear three things in mind. You need to be very focused on your scope. You've heard me say probably many times in the last half hour or so, you shouldn't be doing data governance over everything. But right now, let's get a really narrow scope and focus on doing that really well. Don't think of minimal data governance as doing it quick and dirty or quick and cheaply. This is about doing data governance properly, just with a very limited scope. And make sure that everything you do now is done in a way that is paving the way for the future. Do it to deliver whatever your benefits you want to deliver now are, but in a way so that you can evolve and, add more to it over time. Make sure it's going to deliver those benefits now, otherwise there's no point doing it, but do it so that you can scale it in the future, because you don't want to have to revisit and keep changing your framework over time. Just tweaking it is fine. So just to wrap this up, it's not called minimal data governance, but on my website, there is a high-level free checklist that takes you through the steps that I think you need to consider or take when you're implementing data governance. And I think if you take on board the points that we've gone through in this webinar and applied them to that checklist, it would give you some good points to decide which bits you want to do for data governance now. So I would please feel free, go over to my website and download that, and hopefully you will find it helpful. So that's kind of me got to the end of everything I formally wanted to talk you through, but we've deliberately left some time for your questions. So I'll hand back over to you, Mario, in case you wanted to add your views on minimal data governance before we answer any questions.
Well, thank you, Nicola. It's been a really interesting webinar. I think that minimal data governance is effective. I think that it's effective. I have small and medium companies, small and medium enterprises that come to me and, hey, you know, I would like to implement data governance, but I'm quite small, or I don't have the resources and so on, because they think that data governance is about buying a huge IT solution, and it's not. It's not. Data governance start from the business, from the why that you talked before, and then let's move to the how. Because if I know exactly why I need data governance, then I may be putting on the table how is the best way to do it. Is it enough to make something minimal? Do I need to ask for more budget, or do I need a new IT solution, or whatever? But for me, it's really important to say for those small and medium companies that they might be doing data governance. They don't need to buy a really huge technical solution, or a really huge data platform, or whatever. They might do data governance starting from a limited scope, starting, for example, from the defining which the most important data for the organization, and then coming to, hey, let's define the business glossary for those metrics, which are in the sales report, for example, or in the marketing report. And then after defining these terms or these metrics within the business glossary, okay, let's identify the owners of these metrics. And then, okay, let's write some policy to maintain the quality of this data. And then you go on and on and on and on. And without taking it into account, you may be implementing minimal data governance without you knowing that. So it's really important if your company relies in data, and if your company trusts in data to make decisions, to have data governance in place. And you don't need a really huge data platform or a really huge IT solution. There are different ways in the market, from open source, because there are some open source possibilities in case that you don't have the budget or the resources. You may be doing it also using Excel and mailing and phone calls and so on. For sure, that won't give you the scalability to implement, to extend data governance for other data domains or other departments, and you will need a solution. But nowadays, with the cloud and so on, you may take a look at different possibilities. That doesn't it doesn't mean for you to buy a really big solution. So yeah, I think it's been quite an interesting topic, Nicola. We have some questions or some comments on the chat. Well, the recording is going to be available after the webinar, it will be directly sent to all the registrants, the people who have registered to the webinar, and then we will upload it, and it will be public in our YouTube channel. Okay, so you may get inside our website, hanadata.com, or inside our YouTube channel, and you will have this webinar along with the other webinars that we have hosted and that we will be hosting for the following days. Say Juan Manuel Valverde says that the main problem is to say that you must do more work.
Yes, I think, and I think that's the trouble, is that we come across as asking people to do more on top of their day job. And I think it's taken the same approach when I said you've got to find why your organization has to do it, is when you're actually doing the communications and talking to the people you want to do the data governance as you start doing it. You need to take that same approach, and you have to explain to them why they're doing it, because in an ideal world, you're going to make their life easier. So perhaps they won't have so many problems with their data, and things will be done quicker, and they won't have so many complaints. I have been known to say to people, I'm going to make your life better, or at the very least, no worse than it is now. But there's going to be a little bit of upfront work to get there. So I think you've got to be honest and always kind of think about what's in it for the person you're talking to, whoever that person is, whether they're very senior at the beginning or whether it's very junior people that you're asking to do some work for you.
Yeah, it's the same when we talk for automation, for example. People is used to work in a way and to do some things manually. And then when you say, hey, you know, I'm going to automate you this, but I need some of your time to explain to me how you do it, to see how we may automate. And then you will need to learn something new, but at last it will be better for you. So I think that it's the same approach for data governance, is to say, hey, you will change the way that you are working a little bit, okay? And of course, you will need to change to change something. You will need to put some effort, but finally, it will be better not only for you but also for your organization. So I think that this is the approach that should be done. Of course, it's really difficult because it's all about change management, and it's all about people, and it's really challenging. But I think it's the same way as you might do for digital transformation or tasking automation and so on.
Yeah, no, I agree.
Well, it's Fleece Leverton agree with us. He says it's not necessarily more work, but better work once.
Yeah,
yeah.
You're saying
that. And he's also saying people's job specs should state that they are responsible for imputing accurate data, and people should only use data that they know is to be correct. That's something that comes with data culture. And I think that data culture is something that we try to bring here with these webinars, because when you know that data is so important, you start thinking differently about the use of the data, about the way that you are serving data, the way that you are publishing data, and the way that you are consuming data. So I think it's all about data culture.
Yeah, no, I think you're right. And I love the idea of getting it in people's job specs. I have tried to do that many times, but the joy of being a consultant is I'm not normally around for a long time with people. I think I would love to do that, and I would recommend doing it. I would probably not try doing it too early on in a minimal data governance approach. It comes as exactly as Mario is saying, with that culture, once your organization has embraced the importance of data. But I would definitely put that on your hit list of things to do when you're, as I said, always be planning for what you're doing in the future. So I always try and have a list of things that I'm going to try and do when I'm doing data governance. And I would put that on there, but just don't be unrealistic in how quickly you think you can achieve it.
I will also add, not only to put something inside people's job specs, but also to link some data issues or some data culture issues to the bonus of the people within the objectives. That's something that really works.
It does. And I think the other thing, I'm glad you said that, Mario, it made me think of, I've seen where you need to perhaps go and look at other things that are being targeted for bonuses, because they could be promoting poor data quality. The one thing that always comes to mind is if you work for a company that has a telephone center for whatever reason, and quite often the people that work on the telephone centers, the agents are quite junior. And I've worked with a few companies where they've been given targets to get off the phone as quickly as possible. And if you work with a company that has set their agents that kind of target, it's easy to say, oh, well, Mario, I've got your name, thank you. Oh, the date of birth field isn't mandatory, so I'll miss that one out. And I even had one company where they made it mandatory for mobile phone number to be captured to do with another project they were planning. And they just told the call agents they had to suddenly collect that, but they were still tasked with getting off the phone in under 2 minutes. So one particular call agent didn't ask anybody their mobile phone number. He just typed his own in, and they found the same mobile phone number on 800 different records. And he was stupid enough to use his own mobile phone number. So when they rung up to try and work out what had happened, he answered. They knew who it was. So look at what other targets there are, because they could be actually causing poor quality data for you.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. And it all started with risk data aggregation from Basilea, and they had the same problem with agents in the commercial offices from the banks, because when writing new proposals, new law for loans or for mortgages and so on, they don't input the right data, so the risk can be right evaluated. So finally, the wheel goes and on and on and on and on, and the poor data quality is like a virus. It goes through a whole data life cycle till the top.
Yeah.
Okay. So, well, I think that we are done with this webinar. Jacqueline is asking that if it's going to be shared. Yes, the recording will be shared by email to all the registrants, and it will be also uploaded to our YouTube channel and within our website. So, thank you very much, Nicola, for your time.
You're welcome.
Thank you all the attendants for your time too, and hope that you have enjoyed this webinar. And please keep in touch with us, because we will be hosting new webinars during this month and the following ones. And hope to see you again. Thank you, Nicola.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.